She thought a nationality card and a few rehearsed arguments would make her untouchable. She refused to roll down her window, denied the need for a driver's license, and even claimed her car was beyond U.S. jurisdiction. But when tinted windows, fake plates, and a high-speed chase collided with the patience of seasoned officers, her fantasy of freedom crumbled. This wasn't just another traffic stop, it was the unraveling of an ideology, ending in sirens, steel cuffs, and a harsh reminder that the law cannot be out. The excerpt opens with what initially appears to be a routine traffic stop. An officer approaches a vehicle and engages the driver in a polite and standard manner, asking her to roll down the window for clearer communication. At this early stage, the tone seems ordinary, even casual, as both sides exchange the typical greetings that often precede a police interaction. However, almost immediately, the situation begins to shift from routine to tense, as the driver refuses to comply with basic requests and begins introducing arguments that fall outside the normal framework of traffic law. The reason for the stop is quickly established. The car's windows are tinted so heavily that visibility is obstructed, and there are no visible license plates on the vehicle. These are standard violations that justify a traffic stop anywhere in the United States. Window tint laws varied by state, but excessively dark tinting is often illegal because it prevents officers from safely viewing inside a vehicle. Similarly, driving without valid plates or with concealed plates is a clear violation of the law, as it prevents proper vehicle identification. From the officer's perspective, these issues alone already warrant a stop, questioning, and possibly a citation. However, rather than responding with normal documentation such as presenting a driver's license, registration, or insurance card, the driver immediately disputes the officer's statements. She insists that her vehicle does, in fact, have plates, both in the front and the back. But when the officer clarifies that the rear plate is not an Ohio plate, nor from any U.S. state, she reveals the first sign of sovereign citizen rhetoric. She explains that she is not from Ohio and claims her identification comes from an external authority. This unusual answer immediately sets the tone for the interaction. What should have been a straightforward verification of documents transforms into a debate over jurisdiction, authority, and personal identity. As the dialogue continues, the driver asserts that she is from the area, but then adds, somewhat contradictorily, that she is from Morocco. She explains that the name of this country is called Morocco, which reveals both confusion and an attempt to sidestep the officer's questions. Her use of the term Morocco is not geographical but ideological, reflecting a belief common among Moorish sovereign citizens, a subgroup within the broader sovereign citizen movement. These individuals often claim that they are exempt from U.S. law because of alleged treaties, consular recognition, or national identity cards that they claim override state-issued identification. The officer, meanwhile, remains calm and professional. He clarifies that regardless of where she claims to be from, a plate is still required by law, and that her so-called nationality card is not a substitute for a driver's license. This reveals one of the core themes of the encounter, the clash between legal reality and pseudo-legal fantasy. The driver consistently insists that she is not bound by local or state laws, while the officers reiterate the basic requirements of driving, license, registration, and proof of identity. At this point, the driver further asserts that she possesses a nationality card issued by her consulate, which she insists is recognized by the U.S. Department of Justice. This claim, however, holds no legal standing. Consulates can issue identification for their citizens, but such documents are not valid replacements for state-issued driver's licenses. In fact, U.S. law is clear. In order to operate a motor vehicle on public roads, drivers must have a license issued by the state in which they reside, or in some cases a valid international license if they are foreign nationals temporarily visiting. By rejecting this requirement, the driver is effectively denying the authority of both the officer and the state itself. What makes this moment significant is not just the refusal, but the linguistic games the driver plays. She insists she is not driving, but rather traveling. This semantic distinction is a common trope among sovereign citizens. They argue that driving legally refers only to the commercial transport of goods or passengers, and that private travel is not subject to regulation. This claim has been repeatedly rejected by courts, but adherents continue to use it as a defense. The officer immediately recognizes this tactic and bluntly states, "We're not going to do the whole sovereign citizen thing." His familiarity with this rhetoric suggests he has encountered similar individuals before, and he knows the circular arguments are designed to waste time rather than resolve the situation. The tone of the encounter shifts notably here. At first the officer was calm, explanatory, and even patient, but as the driver doubles down on her claims, refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of the stop, the officer's tone becomes firmer. He clarifies that regardless of what she calls herself or her card, she is operating a motor vehicle on public roads in the United States, and therefore the law applies to her. His directness is contrasted with her evasiveness as she continually refuses to comply while also insisting that she is innocent of wrongdoing. Another key feature of this section is the theme of authority versus denial. The officers represent the established, codified law, window tint regulations, plate requirements, and licensing standards. The driver, however, rejects the very premise of that authority, substituting it with her own imagined framework. This clash reveals a deeper tension. In a modern state, law enforcement depends not only on laws themselves but also on citizens' acknowledgement of those laws. When individuals deny that legitimacy entirely, even simple encounters become impossible to resolve without escalation. The section concludes with mounting frustration. The officer asks directly for identification, but the driver refuses to hand it over, claiming her consulate told her not to give it to police. She requests to speak with a supervisor, hoping to bypass the authority of the initial officers. This is another hallmark of sovereign-citizen interactions. They often stall by demanding supervisors, sheriffs, or higher officials, believing these figures will somehow validate their claims. The officer responds that she can speak to a supervisor at the station, implying that if she continues to refuse, she will be taken in. At this stage, the situation is no longer about window tint or missing plates, it is about compliance with lawful orders. After the initial back and forth over plates, window tint, and the meaning of driving, the situation deepens in Section 2. What began as a clash of interpretations now grows into a direct standoff over authority, compliance, and truth. The officers, having exhausted basic explanations, press for identification and legal documents. The driver, in turn, hardens her stance, using more elaborate excuses, contradictions, and pseudo-legal claims to avoid complying. This stage reveals both her mindset and the challenges officers face when dealing with individuals committed to resisting the law through rhetoric rather than outright violence, at least initially. The officers request her license and date of birth, which are fundamental to any traffic stop, yet the driver refuses at every turn. She repeats that she cannot give her identification card because her consulate forbids it. This explanation makes little sense, since consulates encourage compliance with local authorities, not defiance. Still, she clings to the excuse as a way to avoid handing over anything tangible. She even claims that providing her VIN number is unnecessary because her car is not under United States jurisdiction. This detail is striking. The VIN vehicle identification number is a federally required identifier on all cars in the US. Her refusal to acknowledge it shows she is deliberately covering or tampering with this number, something officers later confirm when they see it taped over. Here the driver not only rejects jurisdiction verbally but also physically alters her vehicle to obscure its lawful identity. While the driver continues her verbal defiance, the officers conduct background checks. This is where the tone shifts sharply. They discover she has. This information drastically changes the stakes. What started as a simple traffic violation is now a matter of public safety. Officers realize they are not merely dealing with a stubborn motorist, but with someone who has a criminal background and legal restrictions on her ability to drive. The officers' discussion among themselves reveals a mix of frustration and caution. They acknowledge that she is being completely uncooperative and that her nationality card is a fake card or whatever. This internal commentary shows that law enforcement recognizes the broader pattern. Sovereign citizen rhetoric often accompanies individuals with underlying legal troubles who use ideology as a shield against accountability. Throughout this section, the driver plays linguistic games that expose her strategy to delay, confuse, and resist by twisting words. She insists she is not driving, only traveling. She refuses to acknowledge the difference between an engine and a motor, arguing that her car technically has no motor. These semantic diversions reveal the core tactic of sovereign citizen ideology, replacing reality with wordplay. She also provides inconsistent details about her identity. At one point she introduces herself with a long, unusual name full of hyphens and letters, then insists officers make sure you add the E. Such demands are typical of sovereign-style identification, where individuals create unique names or add suffixes to claim separation from legal identity. The contradictions build. She says she is not from Ohio, but then claims to be from Illinois, specifically the corporate state of Illinois. She insists she is local but simultaneously references Morocco as her country. Each claim is strategically vague, designed to create confusion and avoid accountability. As the contradictions mount, officers become more assertive. They explain again and again that driving requires a valid license, regardless of whether she is alone in the car or transporting goods. They emphasize that sovereign-style arguments hold no weight in court. When she refuses to give her date of birth, they warn her directly that failing to identify herself will lead to arrests. One officer makes a particularly clear statement. You need to provide identification or else you're going to jail. Do you understand that this is no longer a request, it is an ultimatum? Yet the driver refuses to grasp the seriousness of the moment. Instead, she deflects, saying she needs to get back to Illinois and repeating that she has done nothing wrong. This shows her detachment from reality. In her mind, her words should override the officer's legal authority. This section highlights the psychological standoff. The driver shows signs of denial and magical thinking, as though her self-declared sovereignty shields her from the law. Her refusal to cooperate is not simply stubbornness, it reflects a worldview where authority is inverted, and law enforcement has no legitimacy. This mindset is common among those influenced by sovereign citizen materials found online, where false legal theories are circulated as truth for the officers. The challenge is balancing patience with enforcement. Too much force too quickly could escalate the situation dangerously. Too much patience, however, allows the driver to stall indefinitely. Their calm but firm tone reflects training. Keep the subject talking, gather information, and prepare for lawful escalation if cooperation does not come. The tone of this section is markedly different from Section 1, whereas the first part carried an almost absurd quality word games about traveling in engines. This section carries more weight and tension. The discovery of the warrant and criminal history adds danger. The driver's refusal to comply feels less like eccentricity and more like a calculated effort to resist arrest. At the same time, humor creeps into the narration, mocking her reliance on a nationality card from the Bank of Stupid. This commentary adds an outside voice that underscores the absurdity, while also reminding the reader that such rhetoric has no legal foundation. This section also illustrates the fragility of authority when it is not recognized. The law exists on paper, but its power depends on compliance. When someone refuses to comply outright, officers must shift from persuasion to enforcement. The driver's escalating defiance foreshadows what comes next. The stop cannot end peacefully because she refuses to allow it. In sum, Section 2 captures the escalation point, the moment when a simple refusal to hand over ID grows into a full standoff. With officers forced to prepare for arrest and the driver digging deeper into denial, it is the stage where the absurd becomes dangerous and where the legal system collides directly with personal delusion. By the time Section 3 begins, the patience of law enforcement has worn thin. The officers have repeated their requests for identification, warned of consequences, and uncovered evidence that the driver's license is suspended and that she has outstanding warrants. Despite their warnings, the driver refuses to cooperate, insisting on her imaginary rules. At this stage, dialogue reaches a dead end. What began as an argument is now poised to erupt into action. Instead of complying, the driver chooses escalation. She starts her car and drives away. This act transforms the encounter from a non-compliant traffic stop into a felony pursuit. In doing so, she crosses a line from arguing about jurisdiction to actively fleeing lawful detention. Her departure is not sudden panic but deliberate rejection. The same stubbornness that guided her refusal now fuels her flight. She believes, or convinces herself, that driving away will somehow prove her sovereignty, that she is beyond the grasp of the state. In her worldview, compliance equals surrender, escape equals victory. The officers immediately follow protocol, calling in the pursuit over the radio. The calm but urgent dispatch language contrasts sharply with the driver's reckless behavior. They request backup, noting her history of violence and drug use. This is not just a traffic stop gone wrong, it is a potentially dangerous pursuit, involving a person who has shown no regard for authority, rules, or safety. What makes the chase significant is the shift in control. Up to this point, officers controlled the interaction by setting terms and repeating lawful commands. Now, with the driver in motion, she temporarily seizes control of the situation. Roads, speeds, and traffic patterns all become her tools to resist capture. For a moment her defiance translates into action, and officers must adapt to her unpredictability. The driver speeds away, weaving through roads with disregard for safety. Officers stay close, their sirens blaring, lights flashing, a visual symbol of law's insistence against chaos. The narrator describes a scene with a mix of tension and mockery, underscoring the absurdity of fleeing when her eventual capture is inevitable. During the chase, the driver continues to shout her pseudo-legal claims out the window, yelling about treaties, rights, and traveling. This reveals the core paradox. She wants to be taken seriously, but her behavior turns her into a spectacle. The louder she proclaims her sovereignty, the more she underscores her lawlessness. The act of flight carries symbolic weight. It represents the ultimate rejection of law's legitimacy. For sovereign citizens, words are weapons. But when words fail, the car becomes the physical extension of their ideology. To flee is to deny arrest, deny accountability, and attempt to outrun the very system they say has no power over them. Yet the symbolism cuts both ways. Flight also exposes the fragility of their arguments. If they truly believed law had no jurisdiction, why run? Running shows fear of consequences, fear of prison, fear that their imagined world cannot hold up against reality. In trying to prove independence, they reveal dependence on speed, on distance, on temporary evasion, all of which will fail once the machinery of law catches up. One of the striking contrasts in Section 3 is between the driver's recklessness and the officer's professionalism. Their radio communications remain clear, structured, and precise. They relay her direction of travel, her vehicle description, and her behavior. They coordinate with other units to create a safe perimeter. This professionalism highlights a theme running through the narrative. Law thrives on order, even when confronting disorder. Where the driver relies on chaos and unpredictability, the officers rely on structure and collaboration. It is not speed alone that wins pursuits, but the system, multiple units, roadblocks, aerial support, and coordination that ensures eventual capture. Chases always involve an unspoken third party. The public, innocent drivers on the road, become unwilling participants, forced to dodge a reckless car pursued by flashing lights. Each intersection the driver crosses is a potential tragedy. Each red light runs a risk of death. This section underscores the danger of sovereign-style defiance. It is not only about rejecting authority but also about endangering ordinary lives. Her ideology, framed as freedom, becomes a threat to everyone else's safety. In this sense, the chase is not just between her and the police, it is between her worldview and the collective safety of the community. No matter how fast she drives, her capture is inevitable. Officers plan strategically, setting up spike strips or coordinating a boxing maneuver. The narrator emphasizes the futility of her escape attempt. She cannot outrun the radio, she cannot outrun the network of officers, and she certainly cannot outrun the legal system waiting for her at the end. The imagery of inevitability echoes throughout this section. The flashing lights are described almost like fate closing in, a red and blue reminder that reality cannot be escaped by word games or high speeds. Her sovereignty collapses under the weight of asphalt, engines, and coordinated law enforcement. Psychologically, her decision to flee can be seen as the breaking point of denial. Up to this moment, she could maintain the illusion that words shield her. But once officers moved toward arrest, her illusion cracked. Running is the final act of denial, a desperate attempt to avoid confronting the collapse of her imagined protections. For the officers, the chase tests patience, safety, and restraint. Pursuits carry inherent danger, and law enforcement must balance the need to apprehend with the need to protect the public. Their calm voices over the radio contrast with the chaos on the road, showing the thin line between order and danger. The flashing lights eventually corner the fleeing driver. Tires shredded, momentum lost. Her vehicle is no longer a shield or an escape route. The grappler device has locked around her wheel like the hand of inevitability. After miles of resistance, the end comes suddenly. The machine halts, and silence fills the air. But the silence is deceptive. It carries the weight of confrontation, of an ideology collapsing under the hard asphalt of reality. Officers approach with weapons drawn, voices sharp but controlled. The commands are clear. For the driver, these words are no different than before. They echo the same demands officers made at the start of the stop. Yet now the setting has changed, no longer a roadside conversation, but a high-risk felony arrest. Her refusal is no longer a debate, it is a dangerous gamble. Even here, surrounded and immobilized, she clings to a script of defiance. She insists she has done nothing wrong, that she is being kidnapped, that she is traveling peacefully. Her words clash with the obvious reality of sirens, guns, and officers circling her disabled car. This moment reveals the depth of her denial. Faced with overwhelming proof that her worldview does not shield her, she doubles down. Instead of reckoning with consequences, she rehearses her talking points as if repetition can transform belief into fact. Her resistance has shifted from physical escape to verbal refusal, but the outcome is the same. Law enforcement knows that this stage is the most dangerous. A cornered individual may act irrationally, lashing out in desperation. Officers maintain distance, using their vehicles and weapons as cover. Commands grow louder, sharper, more synchronized. Their strategy is not only to capture her but also to minimize risk to themselves, to her, and to the public still watching. This controlled escalation demonstrates the contrast that runs through the entire narrative. Law operates through structure, while the driver operates through chaos. Even at the climax, officers lean on procedure, training, and coordination. Finally, after repeated warnings and the visible presence of overwhelming force, the driver exits the vehicle. She protests loudly, accusing officers of abuse, claiming violation of imaginary treaties, insisting on her rights. Yet the handcuffs click shut, cold and final. The metal around her wrists is not merely physical restraint, it symbolizes the end of her illusion. As officers search her and secure the car, the narrative tone sharpens. The commentary mocks her stubbornness, the once grandiose claims of sovereignty reduced to muttered complaints in the back of a squad car. Her supposed independence ends with state-issued restraints and the undeniable authority of the law. With the dust settled, the full scope of her crimes comes into focus. What began as a simple window tint violation and a missing plate has spiraled into the list of charges reveals the irony. In her attempt to prove freedom, she has chained herself to far greater legal burdens. The victory of defiance has transformed into a pile of charges that could lead to jail time, fines, and a permanent record. The narrator, who has guided us with sarcasm and sharp critique, frames this conclusion as inevitable. Her sovereign arguments are not just false, they are dangerous, laughable, and self-defeating. Phrases like "bank of stupid" or "loco" from Morocco highlight how the wider public views such behavior not as brave resistance but as absurd spectacle. The mocking tone carries a deeper point. Laws are not defeated by wordplay. A nationality card, a redefinition of driving, or denial of jurisdiction cannot shield someone from the practical machinery of enforcement. The arrest scene drives home this lesson with stark clarity. Symbolically, the arrest marks the collapse of the sovereign citizen fantasy. For hours, the driver has insisted she cannot be touched, that treaties and consulates protect her, that she is immune. Yet reality arrives in the form of handcuffs, paperwork, and jail bars. Her ideology, built on denial, crumbles when confronted with the physical power of the state. The image of her being escorted to the patrol car encapsulates the clash between belief and reality. It is not just one woman being arrested, it's the idea of absolute personal sovereignty being dragged into the jurisdiction it tried to reject. For the officers, the arrest validates their patience and professionalism. They endured endless arguments, defiance, and even the dangers of a pursuit, yet they brought the situation to a close without loss of life. Their calm discipline stands in contrast to her irrationality. The arrest is not just about punishing her, it is about restoring order. The chase endangered others, her refusal wasted resources, and her ideology undermined lawful authority. The act of arrest is society's way of reasserting the rules that protect the community from chaos. Beyond this single encounter lies a larger truth. Sovereign citizen ideology is not just eccentric, it is perilous. By rejecting authority, individuals place themselves and others at risk. What begins as wordplay at a traffic stop can escalate into dangerous confrontations, pursuits, and arrests. The aftermath serves as a cautionary tale. Her arrest is not an isolated case, but part of a broader pattern where individuals misled by pseudo-legal myths clash with the reality of law enforcement. The lesson is simple. Authority cannot be argued away. Compliance is not surrender, it is recognition of shared rules that keep society functioning. The tone of this section is both decisive and mocking. It is decisive because the story reaches its end. The suspect is caught, charges are filed, and the law reasserts itself. It is mocking because the driver's final protests sound hollow, stripped of credibility by the weight of reality. Together, these tones create closure that is both satisfying and sobering. This progression mirrors a tragic structure. Defiance grows until it destroys the one who clings to it. The driver's downfall is not caused by police aggression, but by her own refusal to recognize reality. In the end, the clash between ideology and law resolves in favor of law, as it inevitably must. The section reminds us that while people may craft elaborate fantasies of independence, those fantasies collapse the moment they collide with structured authority. The arrest, far from being a violation of her rights, is the fulfillment of law's duty to protect society from chaos and hold individuals accountable for reckless behavior.